Hello, everybody. It's Deborah here again from Thrive. And today I'm absolutely thrilled to have a guest called Chris Young. Chris is a part of our Western Cape Thrive community. And today we're going to be discussing grief. And, you know, we've had so many conversations with different people who, or parents or caregivers who have are caring for children who are deaf or hard of hearing, and it's almost every single time we hear from them, you know, if we talk about the emotions that we've all had to go through, the kind of grief and loss are always things that parents talk about. So it's I find it, you know, quite a fascinating thing, and so that's what Chris and I are going to be discussing today. And I'll just start, Chris, by saying welcome and thank you so much for taking your time to chat with us. And I'll just start by asking you to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Right. Well, an edited version. I've worked in the field of loss and grief for 32 years now, since 1988. When I started, there was very little focus on it in South Africa, so we went over to Britain, trained further there. I am an ordained minister, have been for 41 years, but I haven't worked in full-time ministry for the last 32 or 33 years. So I'm married, 3 children, one of 39, one of 37, and our Megan, who is involved with Thrive, who is hard of hearing. And she's a bit younger. I'll leave her age out of it. So that's the work I do and have done for many years, and consider it an enormous privilege working in the field of loss and grief.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you, Chris. Could you tell us, what is grief?
Right. Grief is our response to loss. We can't have one without the other. We all face loss from the moment we are born. In fact, the birth process itself could be seen a loss of leaving the comfortable room and coming out into the big wide world. So loss is part of life, and I like to think of it as things that we are attached to that give us a sense of meaning and purpose in life. So obviously death is the big one, and I say for many of us, we have a little equation in our head that says loss equals death. And I'd like to blow that up and say that loss is much bigger than death. Death is huge, but it's not the only loss by any manner of means. And so we lose people, we lose our physical health, we lose our hearing, we lose our jobs. We also lose things we've never had, and that's not often thought about. What about our dreams? And I think of those of us who are parents of children who are hard of hearing or profoundly deaf, the dreams we had for those children, the hopes, the way we thought life would be, when they don't work out like that, are also very significant losses. So somebody once said to me, who should have known better, but can we lose something that we've never had? And for me, emphatically, the answer is yes. We lose things that are tangible, but we also lose things that are intangible. Part of our assumptive world, we call it in psychology, the way we hoped life would be, the way we thought it would work itself out. So that's loss. Grief is our response to that. It's what we feel and experience in response to that loss, whatever it is. And another bit of blowing up, if I said to folk, describe grief for me, and I do it a lot when I'm lecturing and teaching, and I write it all up, all the emotional words come out: hurt, pain, anger, and very seldom anything else. Of course, a large part of grief is emotion, but there's also the cognitive, the confusion, the sense of being out of touch, being unable to do things, that sort of stuff. There's behavior, our behavior changes. We can withdraw, for instance, sleeplessness or overeating. Who of us eat when we're under stress? So there's also behavioral responses, cognitive responses, emotional responses, and I always leave one out, and the physical. I have coined this phrase that says sometimes the body speaks first. So there's no obvious emotion, no obvious behavioral changes, but there's headaches, neck aches, tummy aches, tired muscles and limbs. So very often, particularly for men, who do not often have a vocabulary for grief, they struggle more because they're meant to be tough and keep it in, but the body betrays them and lets us know that they are really struggling. As well as, for instance, the broken heart. It's a physical phenomenon of actually just feeling immense pain over the chest area. So briefly, that's what a little bit about loss and grief. Back to you if you want to ask some more.
It actually, I mean, I'm known for being emotional. That's my sign name. I'm always emotional. And I find it strange that what you've said has brought up all this emotion for me. Because really, what you've said has made so much sense. That takes me back to the moment when I experienced so much grief. When I discovered that my daughter was deaf, and I mean, as I've said, so many of our parents experienced this. But you know, so much of what you said made sense, and for me, it was very much. It was exactly that. It was everything that I thought was going to happen in relation to this child that I loved, obviously, as parents more than anything. And in that moment, I felt that this is not a reality, but my feelings said, that's all chopped off. It felt like that was chopped off. So it felt like the child that was next to me was no longer the child that I thought I had. And that was the loss. It was, I felt like I'd lost what I thought I had. And it was those dreams. And I mean, I say this, I actually find it strange that I still to this day get so emotional when I think back to that day, because I know now that we have created something better than what I ever dreamed. We have surmounted obstacles. We have exceeded expectations of everybody, professionals and, you know, ourselves, our own expectations. We've exceeded that. We've, you know, and I always say it's having a deaf daughter has been the best thing that's actually ever happened to me. It's changed so much about my life. It's been a positive force. And not to say it's been easy. It hasn't been easy. We've had to put in a lot of work, but I actually still find it strange that I often get, especially when I speak to other parents of children who are deaf and hard of hearing, and we talk about these experiences of grief, I find it so weird that I still get so choked up thinking back to that moment when I experienced that so profoundly. And for me, I feel that it wasn't long lasting. I think it felt like I was able to move on quite quickly. I don't know if I did or didn't, but yeah, I still find it strange, and I get so emotional when I talk about that. And also, I mean, the other thing that I remember as well is you spoke there about, you know, it's also, you can get these feelings of confusion and feeling, you know, out of touch. And one of the, you know, so you have the situation as a parent and you have the grief, and that is completely overwhelming. But then you also have the sense that, well, you have other things like guilt, and as parents, we have all these different emotions, but then you have this other feeling of, you know, this feeling of urgency to now move forward and make a plan and to do something and to rectify the situation. And what are we going to do now? My whole life is upside down. And I suppose it depends what type of person you are. But for me, I was like, so what next? Now, but you're feeling so incapacitated because of those deep feelings of loss and all the grief you're experiencing, but then this like feeling that you should be making a plan. Yeah, that's just to share some of what I experienced, all of it together.
I think you're saying something very...
Carry on, Chris.
I think you're saying something very important. There's a sense that loss is never lost. So when I'm teaching, I write on the whiteboard, I rub it out. I write a word, it's obliterated, it's gone. But what we lose is not gone. We grow with the pain and the loss comes into another perspective, but it's not wiped out. So along comes someone like Chris Young or another trigger, and that grief can be there for it's shorter. It's short and sharp. It's not like that initial grief, but it's a stab of pain. It's part of us. So, but people often get surprised and think, "Oh, help! Have I lost it? I'm feeling it again like that."
Yes, so that I find so interesting, because I've often thought the fact that I react like this, and as you say, that's exactly what it is. It's a trigger. Talking to you is a trigger to that experience that I've had, and I've often thought to myself, does this mean that I haven't grieved properly, or does this mean that I'm not over it, or does this mean that I haven't accepted it because I thought I'd reached all of those milestones? And then I'm like, but why is this happening again?
Use some of my pet hates there. Get over it and accept it. Do we ever get over it? Do we ever totally accept it? We learn to, I like the word, to adjust or to accommodate it, integrate it into our lives. But there'll be times at different times in our lives and our children's lives or whoever that it still hurts. There'll always be an element of pain, but it will be different to that initial shock and pain.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I also loved what you said about loss being a part of life. And you use even the analogy of a child being born and they've lost the comfort of the womb. So I don't think, this is something I've only just realized today, I didn't know this before, that not a single life, not a single human life escapes the experience of loss. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wow. Well, that's a penny dropping for me. Didn't realize I
we
knew.
don't look at it. We don't look at it. We are life affirming as a species. So a lot of loss, if only we could teach our, as a pet love, teach our children more to deal with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And you know, I also like what you said, because I think most of us, we often associate loss and death, a physical death of someone. So the only time we expect to grieve in our lives is when we've lost a parent or you know, somebody that we love dearly and who's close to us. And obviously that has varying degrees, but I think so many people don't associate loss with events or especially, as you said, life not turning out the way we thought it would be. And I think that's also relevant, so relevant for us caregivers of deaf or hard of hearing children, because we certainly, you feel not only are you grieving the fact that your dreams you had for your child might not materialize, you know, but you're also grieving that your dreams that you had, maybe it's a career path, are going to be harder to realize because you've got to put so much more energy into somebody else thriving in their life. So, yeah.
Everything changes. It's about change. Really.
That's it. Everything changes. And as I say, my experience has been that the changes, everything has changed for me, but there have been some such beautiful things. I mean, even the way I look at parenting, not only of my deaf child, but also of my hearing children, has completely changed. It has set me on a completely different and more meaningful work path. It has made me more empathetic and compassionate. It has meant that I've met people in my life who I would never have met before. And all of that has been incredibly enriching. And just something else that comes to my mind, you know, we, as a parent, you always feel like you want to create a life for your child that has no hardship. You know, that's instinctive. Right. We want it to be smooth for them. We want everything to work out the way they want it. We don't want them to ever experience pain, you know. But I have learned that the experience of hardship and pain, provided it's not obviously extreme trauma, but there's always a gem in there. There's always amazing learning and resilience that can be built from that. Do you agree?
That's very important.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think that loss need not be, we see it so negatively, but it need not always ultimately be negative. And there can be so much growth that comes out of darkness. In fact, most life comes out of dark places. There's a lovely Arabian proverb that says, all sun makes a desert.
Mm.
And sometimes it's the darker the days and that bring life, new life.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I love that. Yeah. Can I ask you about, we always hear about the stages of grief, and I'm not terribly familiar with them, but I'd love you just to talk us through those.
Right. I have to confess that's another word I don't like.
Okay,
why I
great.
don't like the word. I don't like the word stages, but it
Okay.
feels too neat for me. Stage
Yes.
1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. And I say,
Yes.
who of us go through life like that? So the particular writer whom I have found enormously helpful and I like, he talks of 4 tasks. First of all, I like tasks because it says, therefore, we have to engage with our loss. So I often say to folks, we can't just put our heads under the table and hope that the dark clouds will go away. We have to engage with what is happening. So he says there are 4 tasks. One is to acknowledge the reality of the loss. That might sound terribly obvious, but often in families, we don't acknowledge. We carry on, we take control, but we're not actually acknowledging what is happening. But it's very important to be able to acknowledge it. Secondly, he says another task is to feel the pain. Now that's, as you've said, very uncomfortable. We don't like pain, but it's essential. And so be able individually and as a family to talk about that pain of having a child who's different or whatever in our midst. And pain takes many different shapes, comes in many different shapes and sizes. But I like to say, wears different clothes all the day. So it can be pain about this in the morning, but pain about that in the afternoon. It has many facets and nuances to it, but it's important to talk about it. And I like to say that the protection racket isn't only in the mafia, it's alive and well in families. We try and protect each other, so we hide our pain. We don't want to burden mum and dad if we're a sibling, so we don't talk about it. But I know that Megan's brothers struggled at times. She was hard of hearing and took a lot more energy for schoolwork, etc., and attention. That was difficult. Affected the family balance. So we need to acknowledge the reality, feel the pain. Thirdly, and that's what you described so beautifully in your own life, we need to adjust. And some people go straight to adjustment, take control, sort it out. What are we going to do? Other people sit in a blob and feel the pain for a while. We're all different. But ultimately, we need to adjust. Some of that adjustment is very practical. It's external. How do we cope now? How do we educate this child? How do we do the day-to-day stuff? But some of that adjustment is very inner. How do I cope with having a child who's different to the way I thought it would be? And so it's again like loss is both inner and outer. The adjustment is. And ultimately, we need to integrate. It doesn't go away, but we learn to live fully and well with this loss, whatever it might be. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a bit more like a tumble dryer or a washing machine. Like we get spun this way and we do some adjustment or acknowledging of the pain, and then we get spun that way. So it's a hurly-burly of emotions, up and down, it's unpredictable, which is why grieving is so tiring, because you cope with normal life at that level, but inwardly you've got this churning going on, acknowledging, feeling, adjusting, integrating. And we move from one task to the other all the time in different ways, not in a neat order. Does that help? Does it make a bit of sense?
It makes so much sense, Chris. It just makes so much sense. And I'm thinking now about friends who have decided to immigrate, and I just see all of this because you're grieving the loss of leaving your country.
Sure.
And so I'm just, yeah, it's amazing how I never thought of it in such a sort of broad sense.
Major.
I absolutely love, what you spoke about, feeling the pain. And it's one of the things that I have learned in my life about, releasing. It's like releasing trauma. So I've not ever in my life had specific traumatic events that that I can think of, but obviously we've all experienced some degree of trauma. A lot of it sits in our subconscious, and a lot of it we carry in our bodies, and so often we don't even know it's there. And I have just learned that when I'm having whatever strong emotion, even if it's over something small, I have really learned not to push it under the carpet. In fact, I say to my kids, when you are feeling a strong emotion, maybe I've upset you, maybe dad's triggered you or upset you because he's shouted at you or whatever's happened, never try and stuff it in. You can take some time, lie on your bed and actually feel it. Don't hide from it, actually let it come out. Treat it like a welcome guest, because you are learning, and that is how, and you're learning from that, and that is how it can dissipate and release if you allow it to be felt.
Absolutely. Otherwise it goes in and it festers.
It festers.
And I liken it to a deep wound. Actually, the cat scratched me the other day. It was a massive wound. If I just left it, it would have gone. There's only one word in this country: fraught.
Yeah.
But if you leave it, and you leave our emotional words, they go septic, they fester. So grieving is a healthy emotion. Feeling the pain cleans and cleanses the wound.
It cleanses, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, if there was anything that I would love my kids to know about life, if there was only one thing I could choose, that would be it. Feel it. Don't hide from it. Yeah, it's incredibly healing doing that. And I've even done it myself. And you don't want to. You want to run from it. You want to distract yourself. You want to go and make a cup of coffee or bake a cake or oh, someone's phoned me, or of course the favorite social media, food, whatever it is, to distract ourselves. That's what you want to do. And it actually takes quite a lot of discipline to say, I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to actually lie in my bed and let it be there. and it's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to just let that happen. And I always find that somehow that it releases, and of course it comes back at another point in time, but there is really that sense of freedom and release that I get after I've allowed that process to happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think you've said something so important. You said it's not comfortable. We're often frightened of pain. Of my now 3 decades of working with people in pain, it seldom overwhelms. And you talk of coping strategies, I think we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
That's where a good support system is important. Even just a good friend. It doesn't have to be a counselor that you can just sit with, have a cup of coffee and talk about it. It provides what I call a sacred space, or a safe place, a container to hold that pain with you. But we're often frightened of pain, and I think we don't need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next question I was going to ask you was around, so obviously this forum here is mainly for parents with children who are deaf or hard of hearing, but I mean, this is just so relevant to everybody in the world. What strategies, what are the strategies that we could employ in our day-to-day lives that will help us to cope with and not move through, but move more easily through all of these different processes?
Sure. Thank you. I think my first comment would be that the emotions are good, and that we needn't run from grief and think it's bad, that there's something wrong with me if I'm grieving. They're healthy emotions. In fact, I often say to folk, I'm far more worried if I see no signs or symptoms of grief than if I see symptoms of grief. But then I wonder, well, where is the grief? Where is it locked inside?
Absolutely.
Acknowledge it. Don't run from it. It's not bad. You haven't failed. Then I would say, find someone, just a good friend who will listen, not a Mr. Fix-It. who will just tune in with you over a cup of coffee or tea or whatever, and just allow you to speak it out without any, oh, you thought what? You did what? That's terrible. But just receive it and say, you know, I understand. Okay. But verbalizing it, Shakespeare said we need to give sorrow words. If we do not, in another place, we shall burn up like a cinder. And so I think it's finding the words for our sorrow and our pain. Talk about it. And the disappointments and the hopes and the dreams and the good times, because there are good times. And involve family. I think for me, one of the hardest things I've seen is how family members get excluded. So it could be other siblings, if a child is born profoundly deaf or hard of hearing. It could be the elderly, the grandparents. It could be somebody else in the family, or we protect each other earlier, as I said. So have little family meetings. Take the others out occasionally if you've got other siblings, and sit them down, have a cup of coffee, say, how's it going with you? How are you finding it? Help them to verbalize so you stay together as a family. Because although you're all grieving the same loss, you're all coming at it differently. You're all different people, even though we've all come out of the same womb in a family, hopefully, maybe. We grieve differently. We're different people, different experiences. So allow yourself to be you, even if you find you do zany things, crazy things at times. And boy, I have heard of some crazy things in my 32 years. People just do come at it differently. Talk, talk, talk. Or write, if you're a journaler, like journaling. Somebody has painted their journey for me. They've come every week with a canvas that they've painted. And, you know, there are different ways of giving sorrow words. But get it out.
Wow. Yeah, you got me going again.
That's okay.
Maybe you knew this would happen. I didn't know this would happen.
I'm afraid I'm used to it, Deborah.
Oh, yeah, yes.
I'm aware as one talks, it triggers stuff for people. And at least I'm not a room of 30, 40 people there with all sniffing away. It's fine.
You know, what you've spoken to there, and especially what you spoke to about finding a good friend and who's not a Mr. Fix-It, because we want to solve each other's problems, especially I think if it's somebody close to us, especially if it's our child, we want to solve their problems. And yeah, it's funny that actually speaks to, I would say, my second parenting tip would be, you know, and I've said this in so many different forums, that, you know, to acknowledge somebody else's feelings. If your child is having a strong emotion, just to be next to them saying you are feeling frustrated, and sit with them while they have that, not try and fix it, because we want to say, yes, you're feeling frustrated. I know that he took your toy, but there's another toy. You can play with this one. And we try and reason it and logic it and make them feel better. And no, but the teacher didn't mean that. The teacher does really like you. She didn't mean to do that to you. We always try and make them feel better, don't we? And absolutely. And I've realized that it's so they can move through whatever their emotion is so much more effectively if you just sit with them and allow them to have it. It's similar to what I was saying earlier. Allow them to have that, give it a name so that they know what they're feeling. Straight away, their emotional intelligence is deepened. And yeah, I mean, I love that. And, you know, really at the end of the day, the reason why we started Thrive was exactly that. It was to hold as a community and as a group, to be that good friend, so that we can sit with other parents. And that's why we always stress that we are unbiased, because what we mean by that is we honor everybody's decisions. We do not judge your decisions that you have made as the caregiver of your child. And
Sure.
and of course we've all made mistakes, and we are unbiased. We do not judge what anybody does, because we've all done crazy things, I'm pretty sure, and we all have different lives and different situations and different influences. And you know, that's what we want to do. We just want to be there, not saying anything,
Yes.
not necessarily giving advice, although we do love to provide information like this. But yeah, Chris, thank you so much.
The key there is be there.
Be
You know,
there.
we're so trained to do, particularly if we've come from caring professions and training. Do, but it's being there. And I call it holding pain. This represents my pain. You can't take it from me, but if you hold it with me, it becomes lighter. And so momentarily, a half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever, we hold each other's pain and help them just to carry it a little bit.
Wow, so you got me going again. Oh dear. Chris, thank you so much. I have to say, just because I think there's so much wisdom in however long we've been chatting now, half an hour or whatever it is, there's just so much wisdom in this conversation. And I mean, it would be so great if we could unpack some of that some more at some stage. But thank you so much. I think
More
this
than welcome.
is going to be you know, immensely helpful to many parents out there. And every single person, I think, should listen to this, every single person in the world, because it's just so relevant.
Pleasure. And I'm very happy to pick up, you know, it's been brief and overview. If you want to focus in on something once and do it in more depth, anytime, that's fine.
Thank you so much, Chris. I would love to take
Thank
you
you,
up on that
Deborah.
offer.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Cheerio, Chris.
Bye. Bye, everybody.